Hi, Mandy here from Land of Nerds at Phoenix Comicon. I am interviewing with Miss Charlaine Harris. Charlaine is the author of the Sookie Stackhouse novels, also called The Southern Vampire Mysteries, I believe is the official title. She's written a number of small anthologies, and her current book, Midnight Crossroad, I just picked up today and very excited about. See what else can we say about her? Well, she's an amazing writer, a nice Southern woman, very polite so far. So far, I mean, you never know, Southern women, right?
That's the truth.
I'm from the South. I grew up in Georgia.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. I have a few questions here. I'm not going to ask as much about True Blood as I probably could, or the Sookie Stackhouse books, because you do have so many other things. But looking at Midnight Crossroad, it looks like it's fascinating. What's the premise?
The premise is that there's a very small town in Texas with a very limited population. Most of the storefronts are boarded up, not too many people there. But there's an ancient pawn shop there, at least ancient in Texas terms, and it's got very strange assortment of goods there. And there are people who live in the basement who aren't your normal people.
See, that sounds fantastic. I can't wait to really pour into it. Okay. What can you tell us about Dead But Not Forgotten, the upcoming collection of short stories from Sookie Stackhouse's world?
Well, they're all by writers who had read all the Sookie Stackhouse novels and loved them. I had to be talked into this. At first, I thought it was a weird idea, but the parameters we laid on it were really good ones. They could be stories about any character in Sookie's world except her. Nothing could be from her point of view, because that's kind of my territory. Other characters could be featured, whether they were big characters, small characters. One of them is a character who was just mentioned and never appears. So that was really good area for somebody to build on. All the writers are writers I know and trust, and I had a final edit on them. So I kept control over it without contributing to it with a story of my own, because I just felt like I'd done that.
Yeah, I imagine that it's very hard to give up your children, even for just a little bit, which your books, they're your world, they're your children.
Yeah.
But you handpicked the authors, I take it.
I did. Tony and I did together. Tony Kellner and I have co-edited several anthologies together. And with Tony in position as the primary editor for this, I felt very confident that the product would be something I'd be proud of. And it turned out to be wonderful.
And that one's coming out in November, right?
In hardback in November. It's available now from Audible.
Cool, so you can go ahead and get the short stories on Audible and hardback in November. Audible is fantastic. I love it.
Yes.
All right. You've written several books, short stories, and even worked on a graphic novel series, Cemetery Girl.
Yeah.
What's your favorite format or media? Do you have a preference?
Well, I like to write books. Short stories are still scary for me, even though I've written, 20 of them, because they're very, very challenging and demanding. The comic book series, Cemetery Girl, that I'm writing with Chris Golden, we're working on the third novel, which will complete the trilogy. That's still a challenge to me, because the format is so different and the demands of writing are so different. Everything you write has to fit a panel, and it's very challenging. But I've enjoyed it.
I've not physically seen Cemetery Girl yet. I just looked a little bit at it online, and it looks like it's going to be a really amazing book to look at when I can get a hold of it. Okay, next I'm going to go to Southern Vampire Mysteries. I learned about it, obviously. I saw the show, and then I'm like, oh, this is based on a book. I have to read this. I have a couple of questions about it. The first one is, you have a lot of characters that are sideline characters in your books. Mr. Cataliades, Diantha, Bubba, who I loved. My father's a big Elvis fan, and I saw Bubba. I'm like, sell this. Quinn, the Ancient Pythoness, Bob the Cat, Amelia. Are there any characters that you kind of wish had made it into the show?
Yes, Quinn. I was
Quinn.
really hoping Quinn would make it into the show. But this is the last season, and I know he's not going to be in the last season. So.
And you have a cameo in the final episode, right?
I do.
You had one, and I think in one of the first episodes.
In the second season. Second season.
You were a patron at the bar.
I was.
Yeah. Are there any characters that are show exclusive that you wish you had thought of? Like there's Jessica. I love Jessica.
Jessica's just great.
Anytime I have to leave for the store without my husband, I imitate Jessica imitating Bill, and I'm like, Morgan, I've got errands to run that do not require your presence. Stay here.
She's just so talented.
I love Jessica.
She's lovely. She's just a lovely person.
She seems to be like real concerned about the community, environment, and everything. Jessica is amazing. Yeah, that's what I'm glad.
A great part for a
Great part for a great actress, and I'm glad they expanded it. I'm also kind of glad they kept Lafayette for the show.
Oh, me too. But he's not. He's a lot of people I had thought about who came back from Vietnam with problems. You know, not as outrageous as the problems in the show, but with problems. My son is a veteran.
Your son's a veteran. That's cool. Thanks for your son serving. I mean, I was in the Army. My husband was in the Army. My boss Lyle was in the Army. We were all proud of it. For those of you who have never read the books, Terry Bellefleur does not have that crazy demon problem.
No,
He's raises dogs. He's just an all-around good guy and has a really good story to happen to him. And I was happy for how his story wrapped up.
Yeah.
I noticed in your blog that you've recently reread the Meredith Gentry series by Laurel K. Hamilton, and you're a fan of Agatha Christie and Rex Stout. Are there any other authors that you really admire and you read for inspiration or just pleasure read?
Oh my gosh, so many. I mean, Jim Butcher is fabulous. Lee Child is great. He's one of my favorites. There are so many writers. Shannon McGuire is wonderful. And Myra Grant. Well, she writes this Myra Grant also. She's here, so you'll have a great chance. She's wonderful, fabulous writer.
Let's see. How do you fight writer's block?
I figure I get blocked because I've done something wrong, so I go back and try to find the point at which I went astray and correct that, and then everything flows better.
I write as a blogger. I write for web design companies. I've even worked on my own little story. My personal way of fighting writer's block is going away and playing Skyrim or a video game for a little while, but whatever works, right? Of all the things you've written, short stories, the graphic novel, full novels, is there any one scene, character, setting, or description that you're just so proud that you got to write?
Yeah, in Living Dead in Dallas, the scene where Suki returns to the Fellowship of the Sun to watch the immolation of the vampire, I thought I got exactly what I wanted to get out of that scene.
It was a beautiful scene too. It really was. And the show, what they did was a little different, but still beautiful.
It was.
Oh, sorry. In the book, it was a very gorgeous scene. Okay. Any advice for burgeoning authors?
You know, the only thing that'll work is to shut yourself in a room and put your butt in the chair and write. That's the only thing that's going to get you the book.
I think that's probably a really, really good advice. Last question I have. Many of my site's fans have become familiar with your work through the Sookie Stackhouse works. Can you give us briefly about Aurora Teagarden, Lily Bard, or Harper Connolly, just a little bit about your other heroines?
Well, Aurora Teagarden's going to be a TV series on Hallmark, so people can see for themselves. Candace Cameron Bure is going to be Aurora. This is like a totally radical 360-degree spin from HBO.
It's Hallmark, you said?
Hallmark.
HBO. One, you've got HBO, and then Hallmark's a little more family-oriented.
It's very family-oriented, and I feel like diversity woman. You know, I'm pretty excited to see how different this is going to be. They're all different. Lily Bard and Aurora Teagarden are totally mystery series with no supernatural about them. They're conventional mysteries. Harper Connolly, there's a big element of the supernatural. And, of course, in Midnight, there's an element of the supernatural, too.
You really like the supernatural, I'm guessing.
Well, it's just so tempting to work the supernatural in there.
I Imagine when you're working with Supernatural, you can play with the world a little more too. When it's real life, it's man, that wouldn't work.
I know. It's just fun to play with it. You're right.
That's the last of my questions. If you had anything else you would like to talk about any of your works, your upcoming projects, anything you'd like to say?
Right now I'm working on the second book in the Midnight series. It's planned for 3 books. If, depending on how I feel when I finish this book, there might be more. I'm finishing up the 3rd volume of Cemetery Girl, which will be the final volume. I've got a short story coming out in a Christopher Golden anthology, and a short story coming out in Ellery Queen Mystery Magazine in November that I'm very pleased with.